Welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, airing live Monday nights on KGRA Radio.com and now as a podcast on iTunes and wherever else you can find it. You can learn more at my member site, richarddolanmembers.com. Now, join me for a fascinating exploration of all the things you secretly want to talk about, from UFOs to government shenanigans, strange science, future tech, and more. I'm Richard Dolan. Welcome back. Jeremy Lockyer Corbell is a contemporary artist. He's a documentary filmmaker. He lives in Los Angeles. I've known Jeremy for a number of years. He's best known for his mixed media art exhibitions. He combines art, fashion, and film. He's a photographer, fashion designer, author, mixed martial arts athlete, and he's an instructor in mixed martial arts. Most recently, Jeremy has made a film documentary on the Skinwalker Ranch in northeastern Utah. It is called Hunt for the Skinwalker. There was a book by the same name published a number of years ago, co-authored by George Knapp and Dr. Colm Kelleher. Jeremy has followed up and made an amazing, beautiful documentary on this very subject. Beautiful, but also disturbing. It's available now on iTunes, and we'll be talking about it. But right now, I want to bring my guest on, Jeremy Corbell. Jeremy Corbell, welcome to the Richard Dolan Show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Richard, thanks so much. It's great to be on. I really appreciate it.
Well, I do, and I think listeners will as well. And I think I want people to know that you and I actually met a number of years ago for a very, very interesting project. And that was, of course, the interview of Anonymous, the man who had been contracted with the CIA to go to Area 51 and see what was going on for President Eisenhower.
Flying by the seat of our pants, we were jammed in a minivan together, thrown up into the north, and it was awesome, jumping into something really interesting, and together, that was an adventure, wasn't that?
No, absolutely. I had very little idea. I did as much prep before that as I could, but it never really felt like enough. But I worked with you, with Ruben Langdon, and the late Ron Gardner.
Yeah, it was a really cool time in our personal experiences to kind of just be thrown all together and do that. That was a pleasure, and I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, same here. And what's really amazing to me, though, is that, I met you, that was in 2013, I guess, is when we met for that. And since that time, in my view, just looking at your body of work since then as a filmmaker, I think it's a fair statement that you have made yourself into the premier film documentary producer in the UFO field. And I say this because, first of all, you've got a new hit documentary out there, Hunt for the Skinwalker, and we're going to talk quite a bit about that. But you've also been doing, you did a very excellent piece called Patient 17 on the alien implant scenario featuring Dr. Roger Lear. Immaculate Deception with the John Lear story, and I would be interested in hearing what you have to say about that. And then an upcoming documentary on Bob Lazar.
Yeah, man, it's been wild. All of that, yeah, absolutely.
And then the other thing I just want to mention before we really get into the Skinwalker is a couple of years ago, you showed me a little clip of utility fog, Nanoman utility fog, and I know you've got that. Is that out as well, or do you just?
Yeah, that's a two episodes right now are out on that. I have so much content. I kind of choose the right time. For example, this film that I'm releasing that released yesterday, it was the right time because of the government releases. So each of these things you've mentioned, they either had the right time or the right time will be coming up. There will be more coming out on the guy I call Nanoman, named Chris Cooper, fascinating scientist, and more on the John Lear film. But first, got some other ones coming.
Oh yes, you are. You're really so busy, and for anyone who's not seen your work, I just have to say the quality of the production is really top notch. So you bring such a high level of artistry and precision, and also, if I just may say, a real willingness to go deep into the subject, both in terms of content and I would say in terms of personality and character, and really humanizing these subjects. So I'm really excited about this. And as far as Hunt for the Skinwalker, you were nice enough to give me a link to the screen version of it, but I haven't been able to see all of it. So I've skimmed through parts of it, and I've seen the trailer, and I really want to learn more about it. But can you, for listeners, just talk a little bit about what the Skinwalker Ranch is and what got you into doing this documentary about it?
Sure. I mean, let's go 30,000-foot view here. Skinwalker Ranch is probably the most famous and known what people would call a paranormal hotspot, for lack of a better term. It's one of those places where there's high activity of everything from UFOs to creatures to cattle mutilations, you name it, paranormal Disneyland. And believe it or not, really doesn't matter to me. It is happening. It was the center of actually now 3 major scientific studies, starting with private industry and Robert Bigelow buying the ranch in 1996 and putting the NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science team, together in order to study that ranch. And then it, as we now know, became a DIA study to look at national defense implications of what was going on the ranch. And there's a 3rd study going on there now. But really, it's just a ranch in northeastern Utah in the center of the Uinta Basin, which, hosts for hundreds, if not thousands of years, bizarre phenomena like the things that I described. So this ranch has been off limits. I call it the Area 51 of the paranormal. Less people have been allowed on that property than Area 51 itself. It's pretty amazing that George Knapp has had the ability, although he's had to keep the story to himself mostly for 2 decades. He was able to put a book out under the title Hunt for the Skinwalker with Dr. Colin Kelleher, lead scientist for NIDS. And they put this book out explaining what was going on at the ranch, and he wanted to make a documentary, but Robert Bigelow just didn't want that much attention on the ranch. So no footage has ever come out from the ranch. Yeah.
Okay.
Until now.
Well, the book was excellent. That came out a number of years ago, and that's really all we've had up till now. And it's a very, very excellent book. A lot of information in there. I recall learning about this, I guess when I was still quite new into the UFO field, more than 10 years ago. I was hearing about it before the book even came out. There were a couple of scientists that I remember chatting with about it. In fact, Hal Puthoff, if I'm not mistaken, was very much on top of some of the things going on there.
Oh, yeah.
And just learning, I think initially from him, that there had been this very, very high-level team of scientists who were studying some incredibly bizarre happenings at this Skinwalker Ranch. And as you mentioned in this documentary, it's much, much more than just creature sightings or UFO sightings or paranormal ghost sightings. There seems to be an intelligence of a very high order there at times. And what is this place? I mean,
right. I mean, that's the $1 trillion question, or at least that's the $22 million question that was trying to be answered by the Defense Intelligence Agency program. That money, I'll just throw it out here now. We can talk about it later, but the movie makes it really clear. The New York Times did not get the story right. They did not get the complete story. That $22 million that was allocated through Harry Reid was because of the ranch. The majority of the funds was spent on the ranch, not ATIP. ATIP was an auxiliary kind of program. It was a reactionary program to military UFO sightings and cases that Lou Elizondo was heading. The actual motivation for that $22 million, and it was funded to BASS, another acronym, sorry about that, it was a Bigelow company, with the DIA. It was for Skinwalker Ranch. So everybody should pay attention to that, because that truth is now coming out. The United States government studied what we would call the paranormal. And this messes with me. I don't know if it does you, Richard, but it messes with me. I'm a nuts and bolts. I love the saucer stories in the Uinta Basin, but when it comes to creatures, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around it. But these are close encounters.
What are some of the things, in your view, that really prompted this concern, that would prompt the United States government to spend several $1 million to study the paranormal at the Skinwalker Ranch?
Well, I think I know pretty specifically. George Knapp had the fly on the wall, able to watch these studies. I think I know Robert Bigelow thought he was getting into UFOs by purchasing the ranch. I mean, that's what he was interested in. That's what he thought it was. But as you mentioned, the precognitive sentient intelligence, as it's been called by Dr. Alexander, it was displaying things way bigger than just flying saucers or even alien creatures. The fly in the ointment was whatever was going on and is going on at the ranch cannot be quantified just by saying these are visitors from another solar system. I mean, this is very, very bizarre. So with the success of the book and the information coming out, again, no photos, no videos, all of that was canned, but the book coming out, and George Knapp's, he'll never take credit for it, but I'll shoot it straight. You know, his relationship with Senator Harry Reid, he kept Harry Reid informed. He had first told Harry Reid about UFOs in Nevada because of Bob Lazar, so they had an ongoing private dialogue for many years.
Okay.
And then they get, the information to the Defense Intelligence Agency, and a few of the individuals from that agency came to the ranch and had their own profound experiences, and the implications of which made them have to look into it from a national defense situation.
It just makes some of these skeptical debunking statements about the ATIP program so ridiculous, so naive and shallow.
Yeah, they are naive and shallow.
Harry Reid and Bigelow with their, old boy network of all of this just sounds so ridiculous and silly.
Do you know why? Yeah, do you know why Bigelow got the contract under Bass? And I'll tell you why. And that's because he was willing to put more of his. He was the cheapest. He was willing to put more of his own money and resources into it than anybody, besides his previous experience. So that's why he got it. You're right, Richard. It is completely ridiculous.
And also, I mean, just in the case of someone like Bigelow, people really love to trash talk this man. I mean, I've never met Robert Bigelow, so I can't speak from personal knowledge, but it's very obvious that he is clearly one of the most knowledgeable individuals probably on the planet regarding strange phenomenon and UFOs and everything related to it. And if you're going to do a defense contract for studying this phenomenon, I think he's probably a logical choice from the Defense Department's point of view.
Oh yeah, he retrofitted, his whole operation in Las Vegas to, adhere to these security clearances that were needed just for the facilities themselves. I mean, and he did that with his own money to be able to then receive the contract because he was interested and wanted to do this. He wasn't gifted anything. He gave, and that's really hard for people. Everybody wants a good conspiracy, but maybe there's better ones.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly a lot to talk about with Skinwalker. So again, I guess I would just ask, when you're talking about profound experiences happening to senior government elected officials and senior military officials, I assume, can you describe what were some of the events that actually got their attention, that made them concerned and made them want to spend the money to investigate this place?
Sure. And I've had a very unique kind of perspective on this story as well through my mentor in journalism, George Knapp. Obviously, he's the one that really stuck with this story for those decades. And God, it's got to feel good to see this movie coming out on what he's had to kind of keep secret, even his footage, in the movie. It's really neat. So what happened is something that continues to happen in the area. This is going to sound, it stretches the imagination, and I'm going to make no apology for that because I'm just reporting the news. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. But certainly members of the Defense Intelligence Agency and the agency at large spent a lot of resources looking into this because they did believe it. So everything from, I think the things that were most interesting, there appears at times to be these holes that happen around the ranch, from in the sky where there's a tear with an orange glow that can be seen only from certain degrees of perspective, where actual physical hard craft come out. So that is one thing that is so bizarre, but it does and has been reported on multiple occasions. There's two scientists, it's reported in my film, they're talking about how they're sitting on a ridge and they see a glowing light. They use their Russian night vision because it was in the 90s. And they see a geometric inverted, porthole, I guess, and a creature elbowing itself, crawling through this, stepping out 8 feet tall, maybe 800 pounds, walking into the forest. Hole closes up. Wild. This kind of thing. But the
creature
thing
that would be bipedal, 2 arms, 2 legs, or
Yep. And void of light is really, when you get into it, it gets really weird sounding, but void of light. So dark, meaning with night vision, it was absent of light, which is a very strange description if you know how UV light works in night vision. Additionally, some other things that are perplexing and strange, besides all the trickster and kind of paranormal type activity, but I think things that would be considered kind of threatening. One of the physicists who I know on the ranch had an experience where there was they called it a sentient mist. There is some sort of form that appears to be like a mist,
Right.
and it I mean, it sounds like possession, man. It came into and around his body, and a different voice came out of him, and he said he was under its control, and it was warning them that they are not welcome there.
And
Leave.
it's so like an intelligent mist that
Yeah.
surrounded this man and essentially gave him this message to leave.
These are the reports. I mean, I'd like
Yeah.
to say to you, because you and I are just really into flying saucers, hey, Rich, cool story. I met the guy who could, jump up and basically hit the back of a UFO, and people 4 miles away saw it from 3 different angles that didn't know each other. That happened there. Very cool case. I'm really into that case.
The mist sounded like out of a Hollywood movie, but yet it may very well be true, apparently. That's incredible.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So you have all these other types of phenomena
And you
Skinwalker
mentioned
Ranch.
actual UFO sighting of a physical craft as well. And I cut you off, which I apologize for. But there was
no
an
problem. I mean,
actual
that's-
UFO.
absolutely, and there's a lot of that. So I
Yeah.
don't want to just give you the most exotic stuff, but there's more. I mean, there's like extinct creatures that have shown up. There are cattle mutilations. There are blue balls of light they call blue meanies that everybody in the Uinta Basin, tons of people have seen, and these things seem to induce an irrational fear into the human brain. I mean, it's so strange, but I love the flying saucer stuff. I mean, trees with cutouts where these craft have come through. There is a sinister side to this, and you'll see this in my movie, a very emotional moment. Real world implications, sickness, rare brain cancers, radiation burns. I mean, to the point where people jump in creeks and put water on their face and within the year die from getting hit from these beams of light that are, I guess you'd call it, they call it motherships. They say, light shows.
Uh-huh.
But the people that live there, it takes a long time. The culture, the Ute culture, the Native American traditions, wasn't like I just walked up in there and all of a sudden, got all these stories. It took years of spending time. And can you imagine George's amount of time? But just for me, years of developing relationships with the Ute tribe, the tribal elders, the tribal police force, to get these stories out. And a lot of them aren't on camera. What's going on there is wild.
And the fact that you just mentioned the Utes, this is, of course, this harkens back the Skinwalker term. This is a Ute term, I assume. And so they've had this type of phenomenon for many centuries going in that region, I assume.
Yeah, the Skinwalker was a term that George ended up using for the book to describe it in Native American culture with Navajo and the Ute tribe. Mm-hmm. It is a shapeshifter, a trickster, a witch, pretty much pure evil. Mm-hmm. So there's a ridge that goes through Skinwalker Ranch, which is a living laboratory, a convenient place to study all of this. But the phenomena occurs all around the Uinta Basin pretty much homogenously, but the ranch is a great place to study it from. It might be the center of it, I don't know. But there's Skinwalker Ridge comes through there, and it was told to George by Junior Hicks, who was a science teacher out there who recorded hundreds and hundreds of local encounters of what we're talking about. That's where the term came from for the book, and then thus the movie was also named after that.
I want to jump back a little bit. You mentioned earlier on in this conversation about like an orange, like almost like a tear in the sky. And I'll just tell you, many, many years ago, I interviewed a woman who had a UFO sighting in the 1970s. She was with a boyfriend in Hawaii. And they were out, she was describing this to me, they were on a hilltop in the evening just looking up at the stars. I'm sure it was a very nice, like kind of a romantic evening, but they're looking up in this beautiful sky. And she said to me, and she got so animated when she described this, she actually got up from her chair, she walked around the room, and she said, in the sky, appearing right in front of both of us, high up was this, it just became this bright window. The year was 1973, this is a long time ago. A bright window with possibly with almost like corners in the sky. It opened up, and for like 5 seconds it was open, and then it just closed right up, and it just, she never forgot it. She married someone else years later and never told her husband, never told almost anyone else, but she told me because, well, she knew I would be interested. But this is, but I wonder, like, there are these stories that made me think, is this a portal? And when you're talking about the Skinwalker Ranch, one hears the phrase portal quite frequently, and it's like, what is our reality that this something, whatever it is, can open up, and beings or craft can come through it.
Yeah, and that I gave that example because that is of interest to an intelligence agency of the Pentagon. I mean, that is absolutely, what if we can insert our own machines? What if we can employ and insert our own warriors into places using this technology? What if it's a threat to us that others can do this? So obviously they're studying it for national security reasons, and that's just one that I decided to bring up. But what you're talking about, Richard, you know this and I know this. This is not an uncommon thing. I have heard an exact same story in England. Sky, there's a terror, there's a sky beyond the sky, almost like a city back there. Maybe we are living in somebody else's reality, and once in a while we see a perforation.
Yeah. I mean, over time, I keep coming back and wondering the same thing myself. In the trailer, and I'm embarrassed that I have to only hearken to the trailer, but let me just do that. You've got Colm Kelleher, who again was one of the lead scientists for Robert Bigelow under NIDS. I think the lead scientist, I guess, if I'm not mistaken. And anyway, he's describing a being that was seen in a tunnel, I believe I heard correctly, and he was hovering off the ground. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Yeah, so
detail?
there was a number of kind of encounters, close encounters with actual beings, and that's the one, that was the 800-pounder that kind of came out, they watched with night vision. But that's not atypical for the Uinta Basin, that there are these entities that seem to engage people more like a car crash than a gentle hello. These are accidental, almost as if they're accidental encounters. But there are other times when it seems that these things are stalking people. The other thing I find truly fascinating, I think your audience will too, is even in the Defense Intelligence Agency, there is a term for these types of encounters when they sustain, and they're called hitchhikers. A lot of the people, 3 of the DIA agents that came to the ranch, when they went home, they were plagued like a virus with what we call paranormal activity after they were at the ranch, directly affecting them and their loved ones, and they called them hitchhikers.
So what would be the nature of some of this paranormal activity?
I mean, everything from, mundane things just flying off of shelves and smashing to terrifying encounters where the children and the wife, let's say, of one individual saw, as odd as it sounds, this leering, smirking, bipedal, upright, leaning against a tree wolf staring into the house on multiple occasions. I mean, look, this is what's reported. We know that to be true. So psychologically, we know at least there is something real going on. But yeah,
one of the things that I recall from the book was how the NIDS team was trying to do video recordings of the phenomenon. They had, I think, poles in various parts of the ranch with video cameras on top of them, and at least on one occasion, as I recall, and this is a couple of years now since I've really looked at this, but there was phenomenon happening in one particular area, and they knew that would be captured by one of the other video cameras, and they went to check that video camera, and they discovered that it had been like damaged and torn to pieces.
With great power.
Yeah.
So look, where you're going is you're edging towards physical evidence, and I think this is really important. Yeah. We're talking about a multi-year scientific study, a government study of a location where there's UFOs and paranormal-ish type stuff. We should have physical evidence. Let's talk about physical evidence. What is evidence, and evidence of what? So let's get into that. But
sure.
To your point, there was a number of times, look, the NIDS team tried to communicate at first through simple games and mathematics with whatever sentient intelligence is there, precognitive intelligence, even at times. They also set up, tons of different types of sensors. You use dogs as biosensors. Animals were violently harmed throughout this whole experience. Humans were not, maybe psychologically, but not physically. They did have cameras, and it's hard to accept, and I'll tell you what happened with the cameras, but if this is an intelligence, if we're making the assumption we're correct, it is an intelligence. Well, it is aware of our technology, and it doesn't want to be captured, and we just have to accept that. They were not successful in really getting definitive proof of anything. They have more questions than answered. On camera, though, there are some Easter eggs in my film. I mean, there was an apparition of what appeared to be the Twin Tower that just loomed over Skinwalker Ranch and caught on film. And I throw that in as an Easter egg. No description about it because I don't know what to say about it.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Additionally, yeah, the camera situation you're talking about, perfectly aligned, one camera filming another camera.
Yes.
And a camera was mutilated. And we're talking not just wires ripped out, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of pounds of pressure needed to rip an entire, probably 30-foot, double wrap of duct tape.
Yes,
with wires.
that's right. Yeah.
Thing was ripped apart.
Exactly.
The only thing.
And also, it was in a very, very high. I mean, it was very elevated, as I recall.
Yeah.
Like really not easy to get to this.
Right. In my film, you see, where the wires are torn. I think you see
great.
images, I hope, of the duct tape, but you see how tall the cameras. They still exist there. We're filming by the cameras all the time, so you kind of see the monumental height of them. But I mean, all that appears on this video, which I was not allowed to put out, but all that appears in this video is tiny, tiny little blue dot of light. Nothing really shows in this. They don't know how this happened. It's like nothing did it.
Well, this is fascinating. So how do you think, if there's a hardened skeptic on this whole phenomenon, if they see your documentary, do you believe that you're going to have the ability to make them really question their skepticism, or is it a case where just some people are just going to believe what they want to believe, and even your documentary won't reach them? Or how powerful do you think your documentaries would be for a skeptic?
Well, you can't help some people. So I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. A hardened skeptic, I'm really not sure they want to know the truth. People have confirmation bias, and without even seeing my film, wrote a review about it. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So I think from that perspective, they're not my audience, because I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I am reporting what is going on. I'm showing you for the first time direct testimony of what's going on, definitely showing you what I consider physical evidence beyond just witness testimony. I mean, look, is a mutilation, is a 40 pounds of meat stripped off of an animal with missing organs and that kind of thing, all blood drained out, nothing on the ground, within a 40-minute time period, looked at by 4 necropsy people and scientists, they know 2 different metallic objects were used. Is that evidence, physical evidence? Yeah. But evidence of what?
Exactly.
We don't know. So I can't convince you of anything because I don't know what to convince you of. But I can definitely show you evidence. Now, is witness testimony evidence? I'm going to argue very much so. There's different qualities of witness testimony evidence. Absolutely. If somebody's drunk, that's less quality than somebody's not. But if you have independent, locationally people who don't know each other witnessing the same event but in the ways they should from different angles, right, then that is great corroborating witness testimony, and we can put people to the death penalty with that. So you get a lot of evidence in my film. It's just a matter of if you're open to it.
We're at the end of this segment. Let's take a very quick break, and I want to come back and really follow up on this issue, and eventually I want to ask you about Bob Lazar. But right now we're I want to take a very quick break. I'm Richard Dolan here with filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, who is the creator of Hunt for the Skinwalker documentary. This is a fascinating piece, and I'm going to be watching it in full probably at my very first opportunity. And a number of other documentaries we're going to talk about. Jeremy, your website, I think, is extraordinarybeliefs.com. Is that right?
That's right. Everything can be found right from there.
It's all right there, extraordinarybeliefs.com. It's fabulous, actually. We're going to take a quick break. I'll be right back here on KGRA. We're back. I'm Richard Dolan here with filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, who happens to be a friend of mine, and I'm so glad to have you on here, Jeremy. And I think listeners are very, very grateful for your insights on not just the Skinwalker and this amazing documentary that you've done, but just in general on the UFO phenomenon. One thing that I've always found is that you've just got a very pragmatic and yet kind of courageous way to look at this phenomenon all at once. And for my part, I'm so glad we have you.
I appreciate it, man. Isn't it the most fascinating thing in the world? How can you not be into this?
I have been hooked ever since I started, which was like 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said this so many times, but it's absolutely true. Like, I thought I would be involved in UFOs for maybe a few mones once I satisfied my curiosity. Is this real? Is this not real?
Figure it all out, right?
And here it's so many years later, and I'm never getting out. I can just see that now. And I suspect the same is for you as well. Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, man.
Can I ask you a little bit more then about Skinwalker? I mean, I can't seem to leave this alone. By the way, your documentary has just been released. Now we're talking, this is pre-recorded for the program, but I'm talking to you. It's September 12th, and your film came out on September 11th. Is that right?
Yeah,
September 11th.
yesterday.
And just before we started recording, you told me that it actually jumped to number one. It's varied between number one and number four on iTunes.
Absolutely, that was amazing. It hit number one in top documentaries in the world on iTunes, and has been fluctuating ever since between number one and number four. And we even had all of our advertisements taken down at one point by Facebook because a bunch of people said the trailer was too scary or something. But that's going back up today. But yeah, man, we're crushing it.
Wait, are you telling me Facebook took your advertisement down?
At the critical moment yesterday, never seen this before. We were completely banned. The marketing company, my movie company, my distributor, zero. We were not
seriously.
Allowed. Yeah. In the middle of the height of the paid campaign, it was crazy. But
this isn't even like, is this fake news? Is this just too scary? Is Facebook now our ultimate nanny that's got to make sure that everything's got to be just a certain way?
The movie's coming out, I don't know if they want to stop me from promoting it. Facebook's not, I don't think it's a coordinated thing. I think maybe the trailer rubbed some people the wrong way. I don't know, but we're getting it back going.
Well, good. I'm glad about that. It's just another Facebook thing. Just can't stop.
Yeah. But the movie's doing great, regardless. It's amazing. Yeah. It's a phenomenon. If this is an indication of what's going to happen over the next week, you will see the movie in documentary top one again and sustained.
Well, I think it ought to be. I mean, the Skinwalker topic is one of those that has just fascinated so many people for so long. And so is there anything else that you can just tell listeners as to like what they could expect in this documentary? Like what other interesting things you cover, and are there conclusions? And is there evidence that you might be able to present to people that would be very powerful?
Yeah. So again, I think what I've put in this film, and what George has also over the using the vintage footage, because it's a mixture of modern day and going back to almost 20 years. So it's this really cool blend of now. And I mean, look, I'm on the ranch with the new owner who goes on camera with me talking about the current studies. I do protect his identity because he wants to stay confidential. We have a pop star, Robbie Williams, in the movie, who's just happens to be a good friend of George's and Mark Allen's and mine, and came to the ranch. We used him as bait rather than me or George this time, which was great.
Okay. Right.
Being used as paranormal bait at the ranch sucks. So it's really, the movie's got all these cool, unexpected things. You'll probably hear the voice of one of the top authorities of the ranch who's never gone on camera before talking about it. So really? I'm pretty sure you will. Yep, if you watch the film. So look, the film is packed with information and what I consider evidence, but it also shows the human side, the kind of heroic, courageous side where these PhD scientists put their ass on the line to basically investigate the unknown. And as it is said often, it is the job of science and journalism to investigate the unexplained, not explain the uninvestigated. And I think that's our job also as viewers. So when you go to like iTunes, you get an hour and a half of bonus material. There's so much footage. That's 3.5 hours of footage from the ranch. You had zero as of before yesterday. So watch the film, decide for yourself. Yeah.
Love. Oh gosh, what was I just about to ask you? Anyway, I'm very excited about this. And I will. I'm going to be watching it myself very soon. So amazing. Oh, and activity's still going on there. Then, I guess that's what I wanted to say. Yeah, it still is, because over the years, like I had heard, like I didn't really know what to think. Is this still a hotspot? Or has it ceased? But apparently, it's continued.
Yes, certainly. I mean, look, there are certain things that provoke a response from this intelligence. One is the arrival of strangers, and the purchase of the ranch is a big deal of that. Mutilations. I just got some images from other local neighbors right from there. Happened within months ago. There is activity. It's prolific. It's everywhere. It has re-emerged, maybe because the sale of the ranch, there was a time when it kind of went underground. It didn't like the scientific team, so all their gadgets studying it, if it is an intelligence, didn't want to be captured. But it's back, and I'd say in the Uinta Basin at large, it never left.
Well, I just want to ask, I'm going to close this part up, but I just want to ask your opinion. Like, what do you personally think is happening there? Do you have an opinion on this? Do you think this is related to UFO, ET phenomenon? Is this an extraterrestrial phenomenon? Or, in your opinion, what is this?
Right. I mean, I hate it when people don't give their opinions, so I'll give you my probably wrong opinion. right?
Sure.
And so my probably wrong opinion is that there appears to be a sentient intelligence that has existed for a long time in the area and other areas, and it is engaging humans just like we see with the UFO phenomenon. I think that all of these things appear begrudgingly, I'm going to admit, they appear to be interrelated, that these close encounters with craft are somehow related to these close encounters with these trickster-like beings or these sentient myths. So maybe there is a perforated reality where we are being, inserted upon by this other reality. Yeah, dimensional portals. One of the things the scientific study looked at for the government was, what is the optical nature of a wormhole, and is that what we're seeing when these craft are coming out of these holes in the sky? So I think it is right. So I think what it is I think it is a place, as they say, where the world is thin and consensus reality starts to disintegrate. And that's just what it is.
This is where really the extraterrestrial can meet the interdimensional as a viable theory. I mean, these could be beings from elsewhere, from another planet. I mean, literally from another planet. But that
I've never understood the difference. What's the difference between extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial, or extratemporal? Because if you are distorting gravity, you are just simply by the nature of distorting gravity, extratemporal and quite possibly extra-dimensional, depending on how we define that. So yeah, I would say all of the above, man.
Maybe using some highly advanced application of physics and technology to be able to do this. That would make that would make it become interdimensional as well as extraterrestrial. I have to say, an 8-foot-tall, 800-pound creature is definitely intimidating. And if that were actually the one of the truths about, behind what we call the UFO phenomenon, it actually wouldn't be surprising that there would be some serious secrecy about this. Can you just imagine? How would you tell the world that there are beings that are 8 feet tall and 800 pounds, like larger than gorillas, and probably way more powerful, coming through an interdimensional portal of some sort? I mean, that's not an easy thing to tell the world.
Yeah, and sentient myths able to control your mind, and these are technology.
Exactly.
These are technologies that look like witchcraft. It's like if you took in the wagon days and had somebody open a nuclear reactor and everybody dies and everybody checks on the dead people and they die and they don't know why. It must be spirits. That's what we're dealing with, is maybe a technology that we have no concept of being able to look at. And maybe that's why the ATIP announcement through the New York Times was such a soft-handed underpitch, that they're trying to just tell us, we have a hardcore nuts and bolts program called Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, where the military looks at craft that operate with different types of propulsion. That's a soft-hand underpitch. Maybe they did that because the truth is way harder to tell.
Well, yes, and I'm glad you mentioned this too, because the whole Times articles. They had the two articles. They had the one on the ATIP program and then the one on Dave Fravor's encounter, which, by the way, you have a lot to do with that. So maybe we can talk about that. But what the New York Times really did is not only, as you said, soft-hand underpitch, which I think is right, but also massive minimization in many, many ways of, I think, what was going on. Anytime that I hear the Pentagon studying UFOs and that they spend only $22 million over 5 years, sorry, but that's not very persuasive to me. And I've got to believe that the real number has got to be vastly more than that. I've had to believe that with something that's of significant national security interest. But here's the other thing. So if most of the $22 million went to the NIDS Ranch to studying, not the NIDS Ranch, listen to me, the Skinwalker Ranch, then how much money did Luis Elizondo actually get over at ATIP? And it makes me just wonder, what were they doing with that program? Was he just running a kind of Edward Ruppelt style Project Blue Book, circa 1950s? Sighting comes out, you send a couple of people out there on a shoestring budget. What actually was going on with Lou Elizondo? I mean, I don't know if you're able to answer that, but if you have any insight, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, these are big and important questions, and the answers are probably a little bit complex. And I don't think I know, all of it. But, I will say, look, the journalist that broke the New York Times story, like Leslie, heroic. Look, George could have broke this story a long time before, but as he was told by everybody, he wasn't the New York Times. So he bit his tongue, right? Mm-hmm. He bit his tongue because he wanted it for the better good, which I think is good. It got out. And I think they did an exemplary job of breaking a very difficult story through a major media news source. Now, they had all the information. They probably had more information that they weren't allowed to put out. I'm just, throwing down a little
Yes.
bit something that we know now, which is extra, okay?
Well,
There
we
was
know, we know unofficially, and I've heard this many times. I know you must have heard it too, that there's absolute confirmation of multiple programs, not simply the ATIP program that were involved in studying UFO phenomenon, but multiple programs.
Yeah, I know definitive. I can say I know definitively, right?
Yeah.
And as you can see, there have, George has leaked out. He has put out as a journalist some of that information. If you call the Defense Intelligence Agency right now and ask them about classification of documents you have as a journalist, they will tell you they have no retroactive process to verify if those documents are for public consumption, so thereby they're allowed to be put out. Just so you know, that's the response you'll get. So documents have come out through George. Mm-hmm. I can tell you definitively for sure that there was a bigger other program. The one that's named now, that's out public, that was AWSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program.
Right.
It was a DIA program under the Defense Warning Office. That gave the contract to BASS, Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Space Studies, or something like that.
Yes.
So many acronyms. And BASS was the recipient of that to study the ranch, and that was the majority of the $22 million. Now, they did study other things in other places, absolutely. But the way it was portrayed, tell me if I'm wrong, the way it was portrayed was that $22 million was given to ATIP to study reactionary military UFO cases.
That's right.
That's not true. It's not true. It's just simply not true. So that's fine. So what did ATIP do? Maybe it was an auxiliary program. Maybe it was more like an assignment. I know what Lou Elizondo did. I like the guy. I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. The fact he's coming out, brought some videos with him. One of a good friend of mine, Commander David Fravor, from his encounters, essentially, from his encounter. That's pretty cool, man. I think we're living in interesting UFO times. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Well, how did you get to know David Fravor? I'm curious.
Internet dating. No, okay. I got to be not humorous here. So I was actually, as you know, when you do work like this, you have people that inform you, or you tip you off to certain things. And I was given a tip years before this was ever in the public eye. I knew it was big. I knew it was going to be huge, and I gently and carefully developed dozens of relationships surrounding the events of the 2004 Nimitz Tic Tac UFO encounters.
Okay.
Commander Fravor was one of the people that I had spent years talking with out of respect and to not burn anybody. There was so much on the line. I did not have the ability to shield anybody. Again, I'm not the New York Times. Mm-hmm. So I really bit my tongue, but collected resources and data and information and actual materials for a long time. Then I saw it was being used as the tip of the spear, oddly enough, for the announcements To the Stars and what Tom was doing, which I applaud, which I think is great. And I saw that happening, and I saw that coming, and I did break the story of the Tic Tac on Coast to Coast twice with George Knapp. It was like time to do it, and Dave said okay to a degree. So that's how I know Dave. I've been talking to him for years. It's a fascinating story, and there's more to tell.
And you broke this before the New York Times
Correct,
piece came out. Yeah.
It's on record. Twice on Coast to Coast, yeah.
So let me ask you this. Did the New York Times write their pieces, in your opinion, in order, because is it that they knew, essentially, that this story of the Tic Tac UFO was going to come out, and they just wanted to jump in on it and maybe provide their own spin? Is that a possibility?
No, I'm not sure it's exactly like that. It was a very coordinated attempt. I think, Tom's group had a lot to do with it. The people he had amassed around him, They wanted to get a story out. This was a great story because there was footage. In comes Lou. Lou has the ability, because he has already pre-authorized the declassification, to make sure they were not classified, these videos, which he did do. So it's kind of like a perfect storm. And what should we put on the tip of our spear? Got it. The Tic Tac case is a good first tip of the spear. So I think that's how it happened.
It is. It's an amazing case. It's still amazing. It hasn't lost any power since it's really been discussed since.
I told Dave, 2 years before, I said, look, man, I'm going to keep talking with you. And at some point I'm going to put it out because it's coming out. And once it's out, no one's going to put it down. He didn't believe me. He thought it was like a nothing story. I'm like, this is a big and important story.
Well, I think a lot of researchers know. The Tic Tac story actually was written about. It was on Above Top Secret way back in 2007. Yeah. And so there was discussion about it. And to my knowledge, I don't think the video was released at all. I think it was only conversation about the video. I've never I don't think
there was a hosting service that had a copy. This is a really treacherous area when you start talking about this. There's source video. I have a couple witnesses that have gone on record with me. I did audio recordings, and you have to really get in those to really understand the versions of video there are.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that got leaked, look, you can kind of tell where it came from. So it would be inappropriate to put that out on my behalf, let's say, if I had it, because you could source that back to somebody. But it was passed around within that group highly during the time because everybody was enthralled with this. And it wasn't, classified. I mean, it was classified because the nature of the optics and anything through FLIR is classified until it's just said that it's not. But look, everybody knew about it and everybody was interested in it. This was a big deal, man.
Yeah. It's an amazing case. And actually, I just want to ask you about some of the implications of that video. Elizondo's talked about it. So it's pretty much out that this object, we're talking now November 2004, off the coast of Southern California, clearly, by all the evidence, was able to anticipate the basically the cap point, I think it's called, the vectoring point, where the F-18A Super Hornets were going to meet. And in other words, the only implication that anyone can derive from this is that it was able to easily defeat the highly encrypted communication systems of the United States Navy. Or as Linda Moulton suggested to me, maybe it had a telepathic understanding of it without even needing to break the encryption, who knows. But somehow it was able to know information that it was not supposed to know, and those encryption codes change every 15 minutes.
Yeah. I put out a theory on that, months before the New York Times story came out. I mean, in the Coast to Coast, you can hear me talk about that. Like, yes, our communications were, picked up. And is it, mental? Is it psychological? Did they pick it up that way? Is it temporal? Yeah. That's another option I put forward. Is it a temporal thing? Is that how these things operate? Stored in gravity? Maybe we're just seeing them there before, but it's an optical nature of a temporal distortion because of their gravitational system. Or, they straight up encrypted our shit.
Well, anything, that's right. Anything that can defeat highly, like the Navy's encrypted communications, has got to be such a serious national security matter that they're going to be putting a lot of money into figuring that out. And yet, again, as far as we can tell, the New York Times and any of the other analysts just blithely put out, a couple of $1 million. There's got to be so much more going in here. And you mentioned the tip of the spear. We're at the tip of the iceberg here. There is so much more for us to learn. And how we're going to get at it is a good question to ask. But there's people like yourself out there who are digging in, and we owe you a big thanks for getting a lot of forward motion on this story. I still wonder. I think I will always suspect that the New York Times has motivations in here that are to contain this story, to contain it. And
sure.
I'm not taking anything away from Leslie Kane because I've known her for a long time, and I know she's got integrity, and I respect her. The other two authors of that piece, I don't know them personally, but I do believe the New York Times itself allowed these stories to come out when they did, because as far as I can tell, they knew that this was breaking, and they did everything that they could do to contain the spin, to control the spin on it, and to minimize, the weirdness, and also to minimize the gravity of the situation as much as possible. I mean, they put one story out.
It was imminent. I mean, Tom's group was like, we're putting this out, who wants to be in the front of it? It's kind of like you have to decide now kind of thing. And I think they made the right decision to go forward with it. But of course they're controlling the story to a degree. We already know they are. The Pentagon is by announcing, oh no, ATIP ended in 2012. Well, that is factually untrue, provably and factually untrue. So everybody's spinning stuff.
Where is the program now? If it's not not ATIP anymore, but is it the Pentagon? Is it the CIA? Or are there other agencies running the UFO program?
It is my knowledge and understanding that every intelligence branch and every intelligence agency, and every branch of our military has their own isolated UFO programs, either reactionary or actionary, proactive. And we're hearing, and I know for a fact of other ones, but we are hearing about ATIP and OSAP, and that's great. Mm-hmm. ATIP does, I'm sure, continue to this day, whether it's under a different name, like it was under possibly a different name in 2004. Yeah, man. It's, as you know,
Mhm.
we were told in 1969 all studies stopped with Project Blue Book, and we know that was a lie. So we're not being told the truth now, but that's okay. Let's take what we can get and move
Yeah.
the ball forward.
Well, a reactive UFO program, that's pretty easy to understand. UFOs happen, military investigates them, does their whatever they do to understand the technology, understand the beings in them and the intelligence and so forth. What would a proactive UFO program be like, in your opinion?
Absolutely. So that is exactly what happened with OSAP when, funding Bass proactively at the ranch, at a hotspot, using ways to provoke, these types of phenomenon. That is one example. Another proactive is, instead of like waiting for a craft to show up and that sort of thing, is finding all the people that had, I guess I'll say, biological implications due to prolonged UAP exposure, finding them, bringing them in, and doing
Yes.
brain scans and studies on them.
Well,
That's a proactive approach. Yeah.
Are you involved in any of that, by the way? I mean, this is a program. I mean, people have talked a lot. Kit Green, Hal Puthoff are very much running a program like this that has to do with experiencers who've had up close and personal encounters. And I think what they're looking for are DNA markers of some sort. Are you involved in any of that?
I'm just a documentary filmmaker, and I am not documenting those studies. That I think it's really great. I think there's more to those studies, probably genetic stuff going on as well. I think people will end up learning more about those. I think our government has, been in the collection process for a long time on this type of data, and very slowly, if everything keeps going in the way it goes, I'm sure it will go. But no, I'm not working at a high level with any kind of government agency. I am literally a singular documentary filmmaker who can barely make or cook food for himself.
Well, I wasn't trying to say that you're part of the cabal. I just was thinking that you might have
Richard.
you might have some knowledge.
No. I like to make films on this stuff, man, and I get to hear whispers here and there, and like you, and sometimes you can talk about it, sometimes you can't, but hopefully I get to put it on the screen and break some news, because isn't that fun?
Absolutely. So we're getting toward the end of this segment. We've got about 2 minutes before we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back for one more. And I want to get you on Bob Lazar for sure. But just winding down on ATIP and OSAP and these other Pentagon programs that may or may not have been or are taking place. What? Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you relating to the videos. So there's all these analyses. There's Metabunk is out there, and they've talked about the Tic Tac UFO video. They've talked about the gimbal UFO video, and I'm sure the Go Fast. I don't think I've seen the Metabunk
He's a
analysis.
frenemy of mine. A frenemy. He, Mick.
Mick
He's
West.
wrong, but
Yeah.
that's cool.
He seems actually. I mean, he's very intelligent, and he seems like a
I
nice
like
guy.
Mick. We
Yeah,
talk shit at each other all the time, if I can say that. Yeah.
you can say that. And I thought, I mean, there was a decent analysis of the gimbal UFO video that one of the guys
Sure.
at Metabunk put out there. In retrospect, I don't think that I agree with it now, but I have to say it was a very, very good analysis where the gimbals of this kind of large glowing sort of object, and the claim was that this was very, very comparable to the infrared signal of the exhaust of a commercial jet. And if that were true, the problem is that you've got audio of that video of these Navy pilots who clearly are baffled by the phenomenon, and that was raised on Metabunk. And the only answer that I think they could come up with is that, well, the audio had been hoaxed or faked. And I thought, okay, that's going a little bit too far. Now you're really just
great.
grasping at straws.
Yeah, they do a great job of trying to pick things apart so they're indistinguishable from any form of reality. And, that's important because it helps the debate. It also strengthens the cases when something
Right.
is going on. But I do see the negative side of it. I kind of see, people making comments about my movie without even watching it from that site, big people from that site. So it's really, kind of stupid, actually. You got intelligent criticism, and look, I'm skeptical too. I actually think I'm a better skeptic. I actually think that I have an open mind, but I look at things. When you start picking things apart just to prove a confirmation bias, it's really sad, man. So, some people, they do a great job of moving the ball forward and looking at it critically, and we need that. However, I will say, look, the Tic Tac video, that is legit. That is real. It shows exactly what was described by Commander Fravor. The gimbal video, again, we're seeing tiny parts of much more. There is footage of the fleet that is mentioned in that. This type of footage, I hope it will come out. It does exist.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, man.
Yeah.
I think one way or the other, it will come out.
I want to take a quick break here, Jeremy. We're going to come back for one more segment, and I do want to have one statement to make about those videos, I think, but I'll save it for when we come back. Right now I'm with filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, the creator of the Hunt for the Skinwalker documentary, really phenomenal, and forthcoming documentary on Bob Lazar. I want to talk to you about that when we get back. I'm Richard Dolan here on KGRA. This is Richard Dolan announcing a new exclusive content website, richarddolanmembers.com. I've been working on this for a long time. Unique weekly podcasts that you won't hear anywhere else, fresh articles and blog posts, a special video series entitled Off the Cuff with Richard Dolan, regular Ask Me Anything style live chat sessions, and more. This is a full-featured member site where you will get my insights, my updates, and be able to interact directly with me. To learn more, go to richarddolanmembers.com. We're back. One more segment with Jeremy Corbell. Jeremy, I want to ask you about metamaterials, and one of the things that was listed in the New York Times piece was metallic alloys, I think, that were being held by Robert Bigelow at a warehouse in Nevada. It was all of this stuff. Who knew where this stuff was, what this stuff was? But then we start hearing not about alloys, but metamaterials. And then came this amazing speech by Hal Puthoff from the Society of Scientific Exploration, SSE, last June. And he talked quite explicitly about this metamaterial, and other people have talked about it. I know you've looked into this. Linda Moulton Howe's looked into this. And what he discussed was a piece that came to Art Bell, I have to assume, back in the 1990s, that was from an unknown source that took, a long, long time for people really to understand what this thing was or what it did. And in fact, 20, 25 years later, I think people still don't really know the full implications of it. But it's a material that is part bismuth, part magnesium in certain isotopic ratios. And no one could figure out who could have made this thing. No one could have figured out what it was for. And then Puthoff up and describes it last June as an extraordinary waveguide for high-frequency electromagnetic radiation. And I had to look into this, like, what is a waveguide? And I discovered, well, a waveguide is basically like a canal is a waveguide for water. This is a waveguide for high-frequency radiation. And now we're getting into some possible propulsion technology and who knows what else. But this is highly, highly sophisticated material that just turned up supposedly from a UFO crash retrieval to Art Bell. And now, after all of these years, people are only now beginning to have some understanding of what this thing is. Now, is that the piece of material that the New York Times is referring to when they're talking about Bigelow studying unusual metal alloys? Or are they talking about something else?
Oh, God, I'm not going to be popular here. I'm going to have to say I hope not. I'm going to tiptoe around this just because we got bigger things to talk about. I actually did have a team of scientists, and I filmed the study of those exact materials years ago.
Okay.
I'm going to leave it there. For now. Let's take the premise of what, and I do know a lot about metamaterials at this point because it's been a big part of my study. I was studying cold fusion for one of my films for a long time, and a lot of these guys work with very specific metamaterials for that reaction. Metamaterial is simply a fabricated material. One good example is a material that doesn't occur naturally. For example, graphene is a great example. Graphene's strongest material ever in existence, does not occur in nature in that form. We created it, has incredible superconducting properties. I have two pieces of it, one with 3-degree orientation differential, which basically means it's an amazing superconductor. Hot knife through butter when you stick it into an ice cube. So, metamaterials are fabricated materials that when atomically layered or stacked or even printed in the future, point atomically or molecularly, they will be able to be. They have unique properties. That is something that Hal is talking about, and he's claiming that he has determined that whatever this materials you're talking about, that he must have said was that bismuth magnesium one, had waveguide properties.
Correct.
A waveguide is correct, what you're saying. Now, if in fact that's true, that is interesting. Is that anti-gravitics a waveguide to what? We have to be very careful. So, like Bob Lazar, He described that gravity was a wave before that was consensus reality. He then said there was
That's
a
right.
gravity
He certainly did. We're talking 1989, 1990.
That's right. And he talked about waveguides for these gravity waves that are harnessed from super heavy elements that had been stabilized with the right isotopes.
Yeah.
And that is what allowed the craft to propel, for lack of a better term, because really to fall into time and space. So my point is, materials is the key. That's where I'm not gonna dog anything that's been said. I'm not gonna go too much into detail what I think I know. What I'm gonna say is it's true. Metamaterials, it's the key. It's always been our actual physical technologies, our material science that has held back what we know is possible in physics. So this is a valid and important area of research.
Right. I want to slow this down even more. It's been our science, our materials science understanding has been the big thing holding us back. That's what you're saying.
Yes, because when you're talking about resonance and you're talking about waveguides, you can't be off by an atom. So you need to be able to construct in what would be basically zero gravity environments where spheres are spheres, perfectly atomic layered materials, which we call metamaterials, in order to get the effects we need to access these higher levels of physics. I hope this is making sense to people. It's really important, but it is very, very nerdy. And I will also say about the metamaterial aspect that I'm highly encouraged that if we can learn to duplicate any of these processes that we know and do have conceptual idea of the physics and how some of these distortions, let's say in gravity, could be made. But we also need a power source in order to do that. So yeah, look, it's a fast metamaterials is very important, and it is the tip of the spear for us moving forward as a technological culture. I can't testify to anything that has been said about the metamaterials and what they believe they're doing. I can't.
Do you have any?
I don't.
That's fair enough.
I don't know.
I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm wondering, are you able to tell me, is that piece of material, that bismuth magnesium piece, is this what the New York Times article was referring to when they were talking about Robert Bigelow?
Very unpopularly, God, hope not.
You hope not. Wow. Okay. Well, the implication is you don't really think. It sounds like you don't think as highly of that piece as Hal Puthoff does.
Who am I, Richard, to even I have no idea. I'm the idiot in the room. I'm a filmmaker. I don't know. I'm just saying there are other materials that
There's more.
Government is custodianship for us. There are whole craft. And that I feel extremely confident in saying. There are whole craft. So there are exotic materials like stabilized element 115, allegedly. So yeah, it's my understanding that we have, this is like, throw us the scraps, man. I mean, what are you trying to do? Warm us up to the idea of metamaterials so we start to understand it?
In other words, what we're even seeing now is nothing compared with what apparently is out there.
I am, when we say we know something, the burden of proof, to me has been satisfied. I am personally satisfied with what I have, a personal knowledge of that is factual. I'm not asking anybody else to believe that.
There's a mass of really good witness testimony, and I'm not talking about like unverifiable so-called whistleblowers that are out there in droves today. I'm talking about people who've, now many are dead. There was the testimony of a lady named June Crane, who was interviewed by James Clarkson. June Crane was a administrative secretary at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base back in the 50s, who talked explicitly about the program there, that they had, captured alien craft and I believe bodies, if I'm not mistaken. And there's so many other.
How it works is so funny. I'll do an interview, as you know, and get into one area talking about one thing. You ask the right questions. So I'm sitting there talking with a guy that worked at White Sands and Electronics for 35 years, and doesn't want to tell me the good stuff, obviously, or can't. But there'll be these comments, and these are just like little auxiliary things. But I know superconductors in 1982. I know superconductors. I know who make them, what companies they are, exactly where they come from, what they look like. And when I'm given one.
Right.
That is not made by any of those companies and has no national stamp on it. It obviously has materials that we have yet been able to replicate. I know that came from somewhere else. I've run into that kind of thing time and time again. So the burden for me is that there's weight to that testimony that I can't share. So for me personally, hell yeah, we got craft. We got hard physical craft. We do.
Yeah.
We can't operate them.
Totally
but
get
we
it.
got them.
Hey, look, so we've got about 15 minutes or so, and I would love to hear what you have to say about Bob Lazar. I think most of the people who follow UFOs, they know who Bob Lazar is. For those who may have no idea what this is, Bob Lazar really became famous at the end of 1989. I think it was 89, when he talked about having worked at a place called S4, just south of Area 51. And back then, no one outside of that little area in Nevada really knew what Area 51 was. Bob Lazar is the guy who made Area 51 famous. And what did he say that he did there? He was there for a few times to study and to attempt to reverse engineer alien craft. And that's what got this whole thing started. George Knapp, journalist, your mentor, as you described him, was the guy who broke the story with Lazar, and the two of them really kind of became famous together through 1990 and beyond. And here we are now, all these years later. People like Stanton Friedman went on the record and said Bob Lazar's a fraud. I love Stanton, but I've never agreed with him on that. And I did my very best years ago to understand the Lazar story, and I came away convinced a long time ago, once I really delved in, that Lazar, I don't know if everything he said was accurate, but I've always believed he was telling the truth, and I still do.
Yeah, it's a personal decision. Bob has said he cannot provide absolute proof and evidence that what he's telling you is true. That in a matter of fact, he can't prove it definitively to you. So it is up to you whether or not you want to hear his story. I would listen to it. Right. I can tell you I don't have the luxury of disbelief, and that's a nice way to say, again, I am satisfied that, in doing these investigations, there are things that people I talk to and things I learn that they won't go on camera. They're still in active positions. It would be to their detriment. I can tell you, Bob believes what he's saying, and I am beyond convinced that the basis of his story is true. Now, again, I can't prove everything about Lazar, nor am I trying to. Mm-hmm. My film is kind of unique. I'm not sitting there trying to be like, this is Bob, and this is what he's telling you, and this is true. As you know, that's not how my films are.
No.
What I'm doing is I'm creating a visual landscape for you to engage the individual we don't know, who is Bob Lazar, because for 30 years, he has kind of ghosted everybody. He's been the Elvis of ufology. Is he alive? Is he dead? There's crazy stories about him, raids at his business. What's going on with Bob Lazar? Well, I pierced the veil, cracked the egg. Bob wants to do it full on open, gave me his cell phone to go through numbers, call his mom, anything I want to do. So look, the world is going to see an intimate portrait of an individual. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because the easiest way to deny an uncomfortable possibility that could be true, which is that Bob might be telling you the truth, is to dehumanize the messenger. And by doing that, you can dismiss what he said. So what I'm trying to do is show you who Bob is, what is his character. If you know that, then you'll know the truth about UFOs and flying saucers.
I love that. It's a funny thing. 10 years ago, my second volume of UFOs in a National Security State was about to come out, and I did a conference they were called the Crash Retrieval Conferences, run by Ryan Wood. I don't know if you knew about those. It might have been just before you people that I knew you anyway. But it was in 2008, and my new book was about to come out, and a few people knew that I'd really delved into the Bob Lazar story, and one of the people there was John Alexander. And I will never forget, John Alexander cornered me and wanted to know exactly what I had to say about Bob Lazar. That was the first thing. The second thing he says is, he is totally, something like totally full of crap. And I just stood there, and I thought, John Alexander doesn't believe the Bob Lazar story. He was telling me he doesn't believe the Bob Lazar story. That confirms to me that is almost exactly true. And that was almost what my reaction was. I think that might have been what I told him, actually. And then there was another person there, Ron Regehr, who, I don't know if you know who Ron is or if you've met him at all. Ron's a great guy. He worked at a company called Aerojet for many years as a contractor and deeply interested in the UFO subject, and knew Bob Lazar back in, I guess, the 1980s. And Regehr at the very same conference said to me, everything Lazar tells you, I'm telling you, that man is totally truthful. He's absolutely solid. They knew each other going way, way back before Lazar even had his brief gig at Los Alamos National Labs, which, of course, George Knapp looked into. So, Lazar is so polarizing.
Yeah.
But I have come to believe his story, at least the fundamentals, and I'm really glad you're doing this documentary about him. And this is coming out in December? Did you say?
Yeah, December 3rd will be the world premiere in Los Angeles at this beautiful, it's like the Charlie Chaplin Theater, the Ace Hotel in downtown LA. I'm opening it to the public, like $20 a ticket. I've rented the theater for everybody because I just want people to see it in that kind of form. Bob will be hosting the night with me. Really, this is a new day. This is us showing this movie and Bob joining to host it. I mean, it's going to be incredible. And we're just opening it up to the public, and then the movie drops worldwide that night at midnight. So it's going to be an exciting
Here's something that I've never really kind of fully understood. So here's Lazar talking about a program. I mean, we're going back to 1990 here. He's talking about a program that presumably is incredibly classified. I mean, deeply, deeply classified. We're talking about aliens. We're talking about Area 51. And nowadays, I mean, he's done defense contract work, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's got a company called United Nuclear.
You want to hear something crazy?
Yeah.
So this really shows you the compartmentalization, particularly of this program that he was working in. Yeah. Again, if we are to believe his story, I'm going to leave that up to you. But what's so funny is people say Lazar is not a scientist. He lied about his education, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, George said in the first news report, none of us can prove that Lazar got degrees from MIT or Caltech. We can't do it. Maybe he didn't go. Maybe he's lying. Maybe he bolstered his credentials. Okay, I did talk to a guy, maybe he might go on camera with me, who went to classes with him at Caltech. I find that interesting, but I'm not trying to prove anything with that. Let's just get beyond that. Let's just say, okay, he bolstered his record and he lied. Even if he's telling the truth, I'm willing to accept that.
Right.
He worked at Los Alamos in scientific capacity at the Meson Particle Accelerator. George Knapp went there with him. I have footage of him in there. I've talked to multiple employees that worked with him there. Stan Freeman trying to say that he was a janitor there is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. It has been proven for a long time. He worked there in scientific capacity. Now, if that is the case, and it is the case, is it possible that things happen just like he said, and he was on the front cover of the Los Alamos Monitor, and it just so happened that a very famous scientist comes in,
Edward Teller.
At the time.
Yeah.
Well, I talked to the guy that printed the newspaper, and sure enough, he did an interview with Teller the next day. That engagement did happen. Bob did talk to Teller. So now we're at a place where talked to Teller, worked at Los Alamos. Could he have been picked up when he reapplied? Interesting. The guy that did the security the security checks that everybody's been looking for 30 years, right? The guy dodged George at the beginning. He had a very, very strange name named Thinkman. Well, after 30 years, I found the guy.
Wow.
And he did. He did confirm.
Wow.
He did security check, remembers Lazar. So I actually have a handwritten note from him. Now, I didn't even know if I'm going to put this in my film. That's not what my film is about. I'm more interested in hearing Bob just describe what it is that happened to him. So, look, man, it's an interesting thing. You asked about how could he have, contracts after burning the government. There is a shocking moment in my movie. Shocking. Like, we thought through the lens of 30 years, nobody cared about this anymore. There is a shocking moment in my movie, and I'm not overplaying that. So you have that to look forward to. And just to give you another high strangeness and to get exactly to your point, the whole time that he was being stalked, and I talked to multiple witnesses that were around him at that time who witnessed this stalking. Someone came up to George Knapp and said, it was my job to follow you, and proved it to George years later, right? So they were being followed. Now, during that time, he had a government contract for particle emitters at Los Alamos. Even when he was on the blacklist, maybe the hit list of this part of our government, he had a government contract with Los Alamos.
It just shows
the
labyrinthian, bureaucratized, compartmentalized nature of the United States military. That's how it is, I guess.
What you've written about. Yes.
Yeah, fascinating. I met Lazar just one time. I've never interviewed him. But I was very glad it was during the one of the International UFO Congress. It was the one that he went to. I think it had to be 2015, maybe.
Took some arm twisting. It was me, George, and him talking. One right in a row. And oh my God, that was a dream come true.
It was such a great day. Yeah, I was really, really happy about that. But he's been a recluse. I think he's gone back to being a recluse, and so it's really great that you're doing this documentary about him. And can I ask you a little bit? We've got a few minutes. You've done, I think, a full documentary on John Lear. But is it out yet, or is it not out? What's the story with John Lear?
I filmed for 7 years with John Lear.
Yeah.
I have, absolutely, the definitive documentary of his life. It's not the time for me to put that out. There's been so many. John Lear is not. He is a complicated individual.
Well, your title for it is Immaculate Deception. So that's John Lear's story.
Immaculate Deception. Yeah. So I've got episode 1 of Immaculate Deception.
Well, I just want to say, years ago, you showed me a couple of, I don't know, maybe like 10, 15 minutes worth of it. And it's absolutely just beautiful, fascinating, made me want to see all of it. Do you have a take on John Lear? If anyone doesn't know, John Lear is one of the most iconic figures and mysterious figures in the whole UFO field. And, of course, is a friend of Lazar's. And well, I don't really know what to ask you about John Lear, but...
I'll put it like this. He's a cowboy. He's a pioneer. He's a renegade. He was at the center of the UFO madness, from day one. He was a credible individual in incredible times with even more incredible stories. I don't agree with all the things that John Lear, proposes is true, but, as friends, you don't have to agree to be friends. I care about him at this point like a grandfather. I wish him well health, and I really hope I get to make this movie and put it out. It just hasn't been the right time for a number of reasons, but I have documented his life more than I think almost anybody has ever documented anybody's life.
Oh, I think so.
With the guy. You saw some of the footage. Can't wait to get it out to you. But at least what I gave people, and get off my ass about it, because I only make my films when I want to make them. So if anybody's yelling about that, they can go to bed. But I put out, an episode 1 just so people can get a taste of his life. He's an enigmatic, incredible individual, and I think he deserves a lot of respect. Youngest guy to ever climb the Matterhorn at one point. Only one of 2 guys to ever fly under the Golden Gate Bridge with one engine blown out. Went to the bar afterwards. Broke a bunch of stories about UFOs. Broke the Lazar story. He brought Lazar to George Knapp. Thanks, John. 1977, best photograph ever of Area 51. A series of photos that he got that will never be compared to again. John's amazing.
Yes, that's quite amazing. Quite amazing. I don't know what to think about the idea of a soul catcher on the moon. I think that was him as well.
That's beyond my pay grade. I've not been educated on those kinds of things, man. I just don't know. This is beyond my scope of believability, but.
But it is true. He broke into the field in the late 1980s. I think it was 87 when he started posting on what was then the little baby internet, these little news groups that were out there. And,
yes.
And John Lear talked about, he was very well connected. He's the son of William Lear, famous aviator. I think he's in the Aviation Hall of Fame, inventor of the Lear jet. That's John's family. And
a little company of called Motorola. That was John's dad.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. Right, of course. And John Lear, who's comes out in the late 80s with he had substantial connections by then due to his father, I'm sure, and had a lot of inside information. John Lear was one of the key guys along with Bill Cooper. That whole story with him and Cooper is very, very interesting, but really helped to break open ufology, like wide open, from the old days of just, is there a cover-up? What does the government know? To claims that there's deep human alien interaction. It was John Lear who I think was the first one to talk about a human alien deal. And there was the Lear test, yeah. Yeah, and then back in those days, I think he was pretty, how do I want to put this? Basically saying, stuff's going down now, people. Get your shit together. It was powerful. He rang a bell. I mean, yes. I talk about I like to say weaponize your curiosity, right? And the idea for that is that you're just not an observer or a consumer of this information, but you try to actually engage it and be proactive and investigate this. We need more bright minds on this, from doing podcasts to movies to just research and books, whatever. So that's kind of what I like to say. Well, I got to say, John Lear, he set off an atom bomb, lit a fuse for all of us. I mean, we have a lot of what we are curious about is because John popularized it, right or wrong, which at the time he said, I don't know, but this is what I heard. Yeah, good point. Really good point. Jeremy, we're just about ready to wrap this up. I can't believe it's gone so fast. We've got about 2 minutes, and I'm just wondering if there's anything else you want to say relating to either Skinwalker or anything else that we've been talking about that you just want people to know about.
Yeah, I just want everybody to know the basics, which is, go to extraordinarybeliefs.com. You can see all of my work there right now. Hunt for the Skinwalker is up on iTunes, and you should get it there because you get the hour and a half of bonus material. Just type in Hunt for the Skinwalker. Again, it's 1 to 4 right now on Top Docs. By buying that film and educating yourself on this footage, which should never have become public, over 20 years of footage, and then my recent interviews, you're getting so much. This did not exist to the world yesterday. Yesterday is the first day it came into existence. Any footage from the ranch, one of the coolest places in the world to understand what's going on with the modern UFO programs. So get that film. That'll help me make a part 2 for you if you like part 1. And then, be ready. December 3rd, after 30 years, you are going to learn who Bob Lazar really is. And that is going to be an amazing day for ufology and a fun day. And you get to just see who Bob is and judge for yourself if you think he's telling one of the most important UFO stories of all time, which has to do with the material science of UFOs.
Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell, I think you become the number one filmmaker in the UFO field. And I mean, it's good that you have 4 names because you need that kind of dignified, stately sound to your names, I think.
My friends and enemies call me forename. I'm going to blame my parents for that.
Seriously, it's been so fun having you on here. I want to do this again, actually. I'd like to continue chatting with you. But right now, that's got all the time we have for this program. And I just want to thank you for your time on this, Jeremy.
We will never exhaust the topic. Next time we talk, let's talk about material science and the time Jacques Vallée came to my ranch in Pioneer Town and we got to compare notes, because I think material science is the most interesting part for me right now this year.
Agreed. Thanks a lot, Jeremy.
Take care.
Later. And with that, it's time to say goodnight. Thanks for listening. For a wide range of off-the-cuff interviews I've done with many other fascinating people, you can go to my website, richarddolanmembers.com. Got lots there. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth, let's be good to each other. Good night.